Like, subscribe, and turn on notification for more amazing video. Respect!
Homeless boy gives his only blanket to a dying alien. The next day, 200 alien warriors appear. Jaden huddled against the crumbling wall of an abandoned shop, pulling his threadbare jacket tighter around his shoulders. The alien metropolis of Keldoria towered above him, a maze of neon-lit spires and floating platforms that mocked his earthbound misery. The bitter wind cut through the narrow alley, carrying the stench of industrial waste and alien street food he couldn't afford. "Another glorious night in paradise," he muttered, watching his breath form clouds in the frigid air. At 16, Jaden had already survived 3 years on these streets after the refugee transport that brought him here had abandoned him. Human refugees weren't exactly welcome in this corner of the galaxy, especially after the Terran-Ardelian conflict had soured relations with most humanoid species. The temperature was dropping fast. Jaden reached for the one possession he truly valued, a thick, fluffy gray-beige cloak that had once belonged to his mother. The fabric was worn but still warm, woven with a material that repelled moisture and retained heat. On nights like this, it was the difference between life and death. He was about to wrap himself in it when he heard a sound, a ragged, gasping breath that wasn't his own. Jaden froze, his survival instinct screaming at him to run or hide. Instead, he peered deeper into the shadows. A figure lay crumpled against the opposite wall, partially hidden behind a waste disposal unit. Even in the dim light, Jaden could see the distinctive blue skin and the glowing inlays of high-tech battle armor, an Ardelian soldier. "Shit," Jaden whispered. Ardelians were the dominant species in this sector, tall, athletic humanoids with smooth blue skin and a militaristic culture. They weren't known for their kindness to humans. Every instinct told him to walk away, and this wasn't his problem. The soldier was probably drunk or high on stim meds, or maybe he'd been on the losing end of a brawl. Happened all the time in the lower levels. But as Jaden turned to leave, the Ardelian made another sound, not the groan of a drunk, but the desperate gasp of someone fighting for breath. "Damn it all to hell," Jaden muttered, creeping closer. The Ardelian was male, his handsome blue features twisted in pain. Blood, darker and thicker than human blood, seeped from a wound in his side where his armor had been breached. A sophisticated pulse rifle lay beside him, its power core dark. "Hey," Jaden said softly, keeping his distance. "You alive there, Blue?" The Ardelian's eyes fluttered open, startling silver against his cobalt skin. He tried to speak but could only manage a wet cough. "Don't try to talk," Jaden said, inching closer. "You're pretty messed up." The Ardelian's eyes focused on him, widening slightly at the sight of a human. His hand twitched toward his weapon. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jaden said quickly, raising his hands. "Not that I could if I wanted to. You guys are built like tanks." The alien relaxed slightly, his silver eyes clouding with pain again. Jaden glanced around nervously. "Look, I should go get help. There's an Ardelian security post about 6 blocks from here." The soldier's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping Jaden's wrist. He shook his head emphatically, then winced at the effort. "No police." "Okay, I get it. Been there myself," Jaden hesitated. "But you need help, man. You're bleeding out." The Ardelian released him and fumbled weakly at a compartment in his armor. He extracted a small device and pressed it before his hand fell limply to his side. "Signal for friends?" "Smart move," Jaden said, noticing how the alien's blue skin was taking on a grayish tinge. "But they better hurry." The wind howled through the alley and the Ardelian shivered violently. Without thinking, Jaden unfolded his mother's cloak and gently draped it over the wounded alien. "Here, this'll keep you warm until your buddies show up." He tucked the edges around the soldier's massive frame. "It's not much, but it's the best blanket on this side of the slums. My mom made it. She was good at making things last." The Ardelian's silver eyes locked onto Jaden's gray-blue ones, a question in them. Jaden shrugged. "Don't read too much into it, Blue. Just paying it forward. Someone helped me once when I first got dumped here." He settled down beside the alien, hugging his knees to his chest. "I'll stick around until your friends come. These alleys get all kinds of predators after midnight." The Ardelian's eyes closed, his breathing shallow but steady. Jaden kept watch, shivering as the temperature continued to drop. Eventually, exhaustion overcame him, and he drifted into an uneasy sleep, his back against the cold wall, dreaming of earth and warmth and his mother's smile. He never noticed the small drone that hovered silently above them, recording everything. Jaden jolted awake to the unmistakable pressure of a weapon against his temple. His eyes snapped open to find himself surrounded by towering blue figures in battle armor, identical to the wounded soldiers, their faces hard as stone. "Don't move, human," growled a deep voice. The translator implant all refugees received crackled in Jaden's ear, converting the Ardelian language to English. "I didn't hurt him," Jaden said quickly, raising his hands. "I was trying to help." Around him stood at least 20 Ardelian warriors, their weapons trained on him. Beyond them, Jaden glimpsed more soldiers securing the perimeter of the alley. The wounded Ardelian was being attended to by what appeared to be medics, his vital signs displayed on floating holographic screens. "Commander Talon has a plasma wound consistent with Draxian weaponry," said one of the medics. "The human's DNA shows no trace on the entry point." The weapon at Jaden's temple didn't waver. "Then why was this street rat found with our commander?" "Because this street rat gave him a blanket instead of robbing him blind," Jaden snapped, his fear giving way to irritation. "You're welcome, by the way." The Ardelian soldiers exchanged glances. One of them, clearly of higher rank based on the additional markings on his armor, stepped forward. "The human speaks the truth," came a weak voice. All heads turned to the wounded soldier, Commander Talon, who was now conscious and struggling to sit up despite the medic's protests. "He aided me when he had no obligation to do so." The commander's silver eyes found Jaden's. "He gave me his only protection against the cold, a human garment of significant personal value." The weapon at Jaden's temple finally withdrew. The high-ranking officer approached, studying Jaden with narrowed eyes. "I am Colonel Viridian, second in command of the Ardelian Expeditionary Force. You have our gratitude for assisting Commander Talon." Jaden nodded cautiously. He looked like he needed help. Anyone would have done the same. "No," said Talon, his voice stronger now as the medics administered treatment. "They would not have, especially not a human helping an Ardelian in this sector." Colonel Viridian's expression remained stern. The commander was on a covert reconnaissance mission when he was ambushed by Draxian assassins. "We've been searching for him all night." Draxians? Jaden frowned. "I thought they kept to the outer systems." "They should," Viridian replied grimly. "Their presence here is concerning." Commander Talon was now on his feet, though still unsteady. He approached Jaden, still clutching the gray-beige cloak. "Your name, human?" "Jaden, just Jaden." Talon nodded. "Stu, you have done me a great service, Jaden. One I will not forget." He attempted to return the cloak, but Jaden noticed the alien's hands were still trembling from blood loss. "Keep it until you're better," Jaden said. "It's cold out here." Talon's silver eyes widened slightly. "You continue to show kindness despite having nothing?" Before Jaden could respond, the ground beneath them vibrated. The soldiers tensed, and Colonel Viridian touched his communication device. "The main force has arrived," he announced. Jaden felt his stomach drop. "Main force?" As if in answer, the narrow slice of sky visible above the alley darkened as massive ships moved into position. The walls of the surrounding buildings shook as landing craft descended throughout the district. "What the hell is happening?" Jaden asked, his voice barely audible over the rumble. "The Ardelian Expeditionary Force is establishing a forward base in this sector," Viridian explained. "Commander Talon's mission was to scout the area before our arrival." "All this for a base?" Jaden asked skeptically. Talon and Viridian exchanged looks. "The situation is more complex than that," Talon said carefully. "The Draxians have been infiltrating this region for months. Their presence here suggests they're planning something significant. And I just happened to stumble into the middle of an interstellar conflict." "Perfect." Jaden sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Well, it's been fun, but I should probably get going before things get any more exciting." "No," Talon said firmly. "You will come with us." Jaden tensed. "I'm not a prisoner." "Not a prisoner," Talon agreed. "A guest. You saved my life, Jaden. By our customs, that creates a debt that must be honored. I don't need—" "You are homeless, are you not?" Talon interrupted. "You have no family here?" Jaden fell silent, unable to deny it. Then accept my hospitality, Talon continued, at least until I can properly repay my debt to you. Colonel Viridian looked less than pleased but said nothing. Jaden hesitated. The streets were all he'd known for years, but they were cold, dangerous, and lonely. And if a war was brewing between the Ardelians and Draxians, the lower levels of the city would become even more perilous. Fine, he finally said, but just until you're healed up. Then we're even. Talon's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. We shall see. As they led him toward a waiting transport, Jaden caught sight of his reflection in a shattered window. His gaunt face, tattered clothes, and wary eyes. He looked exactly like what he was, a survivor who had learned to expect the worst. But for the first time in years, he allowed himself to wonder if something better might be possible. The Ardelian transport glided silently through the upper levels of Caldoria, far above the grime and desperation of the streets Jaden had called home. Through the viewport, he watched floating gardens and gleaming spires pass by, a world he'd glimpsed only from below, like stars too distant to reach. First time in the upper city? Colonel Viridian asked, noticing Jaden's wide-eyed stare. Yeah, humans don't exactly get invited up here for dinner parties. Commander Talon, now sitting upright, though still pale, studied Jaden with interest. You speak our language well. All refugees get translator implants, Jaden explained, tapping behind his ear. Standard procedure. Doesn't mean people talk to us, though. The transport docked at a massive structure suspended between three towering spires. Jaden had seen it from below. Locals called it the Triad, the heart of Ardelian military operations in the sector. Welcome to Command Central, Talon said as they disembarked. Ardelian soldiers snapped to attention as the commander passed, their eyes lingering curiously on the disheveled human in their midst. Jaden self-consciously ran a hand through his matted hair, acutely aware of the dirt ground into his skin and clothes. 3 years on the streets had left their mark. You will be given quarters and fresh attire, Talon said, as if reading his thoughts. My personal attendant will see to your needs. An older Ardelian with silver-streaked blue skin appeared, bowing slightly. Commander, the medical team insists you report to the infirmary immediately. After I've seen our guest properly accommodated, Talon replied firmly. Sir, with respect, High Command is demanding a briefing on the Draxian presence, and your daughter has been... Worried sick? Came a melodic voice from behind them. Jaden turned to see a slender Ardelian female approaching. Her skin was a lighter shade of blue than most he'd seen, almost turquoise, and her silver-white hair was pulled back in an intricate braid. Unlike the utilitarian armor of the soldiers, she wore a flowing garment that shimmered with each movement. Lydia, Talon's stern face softened. I told you to remain in our quarters. And I told you I'm not a child to be sheltered, she replied, embracing her father carefully, mindful of his wounds. Her eyes, the same startling silver as Talon's, flicked to Jaden, narrowing slightly. Who is this? This is Jaden, Talon said. He saved my life last night. Lydia's expression shifted from suspicion to surprise. A human? Yes, a human, Jaden said, meeting her gaze directly. We do occasionally do something besides take up space in your slums. Her eyes widened at his bluntness. Colonel Viridian made a disapproving sound, but Talon merely looked amused. Lydia, please escort our guest to the visitor's quarters while I attend to my duties, Talon said. Ensure he receives everything he needs. Father? It would honor me greatly, Talon added in a tone that brooked no argument. Lydia's posture stiffened, but she nodded. Of course, Father. As Talon and his officers departed, Jaden found himself alone with the commander's daughter, who regarded him with thinly veiled disdain. This way, Emma, she said curtly, turning on her heel. Jaden followed her through gleaming corridors, drawing curious and sometimes hostile glances from passing Ardelians. Lydia walked briskly, as if trying to put distance between them. So, Jaden said, lengthening his stride to keep pace. Not a fan of humans, huh? I have no opinion on humans in general, she replied without looking at him. Just me specifically then. Good to know. That earned him a sideways glance. My father is the most important military commander in this sector. He was nearly killed last night. Yeah, I was there. And yet you, a human street dweller, just happened to find him. Jaden stopped walking. You think I had something to do with the attack? Lydia halted, turning to face him. I think it's a remarkable coincidence. Life's full of them, Jaden said with a shrug. Yesterday, I was dumpster diving for dinner. Today, I'm getting the stink eye from an alien princess. Didn't plan either one. Something flickered in her silver eyes. Surprised, perhaps, at his candor. I'm not a princess. Could have fooled me with that attitude. For a moment, she looked like she might snap at him, but instead, unexpectedly, her lips curved slightly. You're either very brave or very foolish to speak to me this way. Probably both, Jaden admitted. Street survival tip. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. She studied him for a moment longer, then resumed walking. The visitors' quarters are this way. The quarters turned out to be larger than any place Jaden had ever lived, with panoramic views of the city below. A cleaning drone hovered near the entrance. The sanitation unit is through there, Lydia said, gesturing to a door. The drone will take your garments for cleaning and repair. And what am I supposed to wear in the meantime? Appropriate attire will be provided. She moved to leave, then hesitated. My father wishes you to join us for the evening meal. 2 hours from now. Dinner with the commander, huh? Should I bring anything? A bottle of wine? Some plasma grenades? That almost earned him another smile. Just yourself, preferably clean. After she left, Jaden stood in the center of the luxurious room, feeling more out of place than he ever had on the streets. But as he caught sight of his reflection in a polished surface, gaunt, dirty, defiant, he straightened his shoulders. Dinner with the commander and his Ice Queen daughter, he murmured to himself. What could possibly go wrong? Jaden stared at his reflection in the polished mirror, barely recognizing himself. The sanitation unit, a far cry from the public washrooms he occasionally sneaked into, had scrubbed away years of grime in minutes. His dark hair, now clean and trimmed by an automated grooming system, fell in soft waves instead of matted tangles. His skin, freed from layers of dirt, appeared almost luminous under the ambient lighting. The appropriate attire Lydia had mentioned turned out to be a sleek outfit that reminded him of formal military dress, though without rank insignia. The fabric, midnight blue with subtle silver accents, seemed to adjust to his movements with uncanny precision. Not bad for a street rat, he murmured, straightening his shoulders. A soft chime announced that his escort had arrived. Taking a deep breath, Jaden stepped out to find an Ardelian guard waiting. The commander awaits your presence, the guard said formally, betraying no emotion at the sight of a human in Ardelian-style clothing. They traveled through corridors bustling with military personnel, all of whom paused to salute as they passed. Jaden realized with a start that the deference wasn't for him, but for the insignia on his escort's uniform. He was being led by a member of Talon's personal guard. The dining chamber was intimate by Ardelian standards, though still grand enough to make Jaden's palms sweat. Commander Talon sat at the head of a crescent-shaped table, looking considerably better than he had earlier. His wounds had been treated and he wore a formal uniform adorned with medals and insignia that Jaden couldn't begin to decipher. Lydia sat to her father's right, her silver-white hair now cascading freely over shoulders left bare by an elegant gown that matched the color of her skin. She looked up as Jaden entered, her silver eyes widening slightly. "Ah, Jaden," Talon rose, gesturing to an empty seat at his left. "You look refreshed." "Amazing what soap and actual clothes can do," Jaden replied, attempting to mask his nervousness with humor. Also present were Colonel Viridian and 3 other high-ranking officers Jaden didn't recognize. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. "Allow me to introduce General Kalen, Admiral Prentice, and Major Dorn," Talon said, indicating each officer in turn. "Gentlemen, this is Jaden, the human who rendered me aid last night." The officers nodded stiffly. Jaden took his seat, immediately confronted by an array of utensils that might as well have been surgical instruments. "We were just discussing the Draxian incursion," Viridian said. "Their presence in this sector violates 3 separate treaties." "Politics bore me," Lydia interjected, her voice cool. "Perhaps we could discuss something our guest might actually understand?" Jaden picked up what he hoped was a drinking vessel. "Don't mind me." I love a good treaty violation discussion over dinner. Admiral Prentice snorted. What would a human know of interstellar politics? Probably about as much as I know about proper fork usage, Jaden admitted, deliberately selecting the wrong utensil as servers began bringing in elaborate dishes. But I'm a fast learner. Tylen watched with amusement as Jaden attempted to navigate the meal. Tell me, Jaden, how did a human come to be alone in Caldoria? Your kind usually cluster in your designated sectors. Refugee transport left me behind, Jaden said, trying not to stare at the writhing tentacles on his plate. I was 13. Been making it work since then. Abandoned by your own kind, Major Dorn remarked. Typical human unreliability. The ship was under Praxian management, actually, Jaden corrected, taking a bite of the still-moving food and immediately regretting it. He forced himself to swallow. Delicious. Lydia's lips twitched. That's a palate cleanser, not food. You're supposed to let it dissolve on your tongue. Heat rushed to Jaden's face. Right, I knew that. I'm curious, General Kalen leaned forward. How did you survive on your own at such a young age? Jaden shrugged, carefully setting down the squirming palate cleanser. Humans are adaptable. We figure things out. He means you stole and scavenged, Viridian said bluntly. Sometimes, Jaden admitted. Other times I worked. Loading docks, waste management, courier services, anything that paid enough for food. Resourceful, Talon commented, his silver eyes appraising. The next course arrived. Something that resembled meat but glowed faintly blue. Jaden watched the others before attempting to eat it. I understand humans have a concept called charity, Admiral Prentice said, his tone suggesting he found the idea distasteful. Is that why you assisted Commander Talon? For some spiritual reward? Jaden paused mid-bite. No, I helped him because he needed help. Simple as that. Nothing is that simple, Viridian countered. Some things are, Jaden insisted. Someone needs help. You help them. Doesn't matter if they're human or Delian, or whatever that thing on my plate is. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. In our Delian culture, Lydia finally said, her voice softer than before, assistance creates obligation. There is always an expectation of return. That sounds exhausting, Jaden said, keeping track of who owes what to whom. It maintains order, General Kalen stated firmly. Maybe, Jaden conceded, but it also means you might hesitate to help someone if you're not prepared for the obligation. What if Commander Talon had bled out while someone calculated whether saving him was worth the debt? The officers exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by his directness. An interesting perspective, Talon said thoughtfully. Perhaps there is wisdom in the human approach. Lydia studied Jaden with new interest. You truly expected nothing in return for helping my father? Well, I wasn't expecting to end up at dinner with Caldoria's military elite, that's for sure, Jaden said with a grin. I would have at least practiced with the utensils. Unexpected laughter rippled around the table, breaking the tension. Even Viridian's stern expression softened slightly. As the meal progressed, Jaden committed several more social blunders, drinking from a ceremonial bowl, accidentally activating a food synthesizer with his elbow, and nearly causing a diplomatic incident by complimenting the chef, apparently a grave insult in our Delian culture. Yet with each mistake, the atmosphere lightened. By dessert, even Admiral Prentice was explaining our Delian customs with something approaching patience. You're the first human I've met who asks questions instead of assuming, the Admiral admitted grudgingly. Street survival tip number 2, Jaden replied. When you're the outsider, learn the rules fast or get squashed. As the meal concluded, Jaden noticed Lydia watching him, her earlier disdain replaced by something he couldn't quite identify. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. Perhaps, Commander Talon said, rising from his seat, Lydia could show you our botanical observatory. It offers the finest view of Caldoria. I would like that, Jaden said, surprising himself with his sincerity. Lydia stood gracefully. As would I, Father. As they left the dining chamber, Jaden caught Talon watching them with an expression that seemed almost calculating. The botanical observatory occupied the entire uppermost level of the Triad's central spire. As the lift doors slid open, Jaden's breath caught in his throat. The vast dome overhead was completely transparent, revealing the night sky in all its glory. Stars, distant planets, and the ethereal ribbons of nebulae painting the darkness. "This is incredible," he whispered. Litya's expression softened at his genuine awe. "The dome can display any celestial view in our database. This is Keldoria's actual sky, but I could show you Earth's constellations if you prefer." "No, this is perfect," Jaden said, stepping further into the chamber. The observatory was filled with plants from dozens of worlds, arranged in spiraling patterns that created natural pathways through the lush vegetation. Soft bioluminescence pulsed from flowers and fungi, casting a dreamlike glow over everything. "It's more than just a garden," Litya explained, leading him deeper into the greenery. "Each section contains a complete ecosystem from a different world. And this," she gestured to a wall of monitors partially concealed by hanging vines, "is our surveillance center." Jaden raised an eyebrow. "Hiding your spy equipment in a garden? That's, actually pretty clever." "The botanical specimens provide perfect cover for our sensor array," she said with a hint of pride. "We monitor the entire city from here." As they walked, Jaden noticed a section cordoned off from the rest, contained within a subtle energy field. The plants inside were unlike the exotic specimens throughout the rest of the observatory. They were simpler, more familiar. "Are those?" He moved closer, hardly daring to believe his eyes. "Terran flora," Lydia confirmed. "After the Meridian conflict devastated your outer colonies, we preserved what specimens we could." Jaden approached the barrier, his fingers hovering just above the energy field. Inside grew roses, oak saplings, and, his heart skipped a beat, a cluster of small purple flowers with yellow centers. "Violets," when he said, his voice thick. "My mother grew these." She said they reminded her of Earth, even though she'd never been there. Lydia studied him, her silver eyes reflecting the bioluminescent light. "You miss her?" It wasn't a question, but Jaden nodded anyway. "She died when our refugee ship was attacked. I was supposed to meet her at the evacuations point, but I got held up helping an old man who couldn't walk fast enough. By the time I got there..." He swallowed hard. "The ship was already gone. They told me later it was destroyed by raiders." "You helped a stranger and lost everything," Lydia said softly. "Yet you did the same for my father." Jaden shrugged, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "Like I said at dinner, someone needs help. You help them." Lydia was quiet for a moment, then touched a control panel. The energy field shimmered and parted. She reached in and carefully plucked one of the violets, offering it to him. "My mother died in a Draxian attack," she said as Jaden accepted the flower with trembling fingers. "I was very young." They targeted a civilian research station where she was studying interspecies medicine. No warning, no demands. They simply destroyed it. "I'm sorry," Jaden said, genuinely meaning it. "The Draxians believe in genetic purity above all else," she continued. "Other species are either resources to be exploited or contaminants to be eliminated. They particularly despise humans for your genetic adaptability." Jaden twirled the violet between his fingers. "And Ardelians? Where do we stand with you?" Lydia's lips curved in a small smile. "Until recently, I considered humans chaotic and unpredictable, dangerous in their own way. And now? Now I'm not sure what to think." Her silver eyes met his. "You're still unpredictable, but perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing." A sudden alert from the surveillance console interrupted the moment. Lydia moved swiftly to the monitors, her brow furrowing as she studied the displays. "What is it?" Jaden asked, joining her. "Anomalous energy signatures in the lower city," she said, fingers dancing over the controls. The sixth such occurrence in the past 2 days." Jaden leaned closer, studying the readouts. The screen showed various sectors of Keldoria, focusing on a particular district in the lower levels, not far from where he'd found Commander Talon. "Wait, go back to that last feed," he said suddenly. Lydia complied, bringing up footage of a busy market street. Jaden pointed to a vendor's stall. "That shop wasn't there 3 days ago. I know because I tried to sleep in that alcove and got chased away." "Perhaps it's new," Lydia suggested. "In that location? No way, that's prime real estate in the lower levels. You don't just set up shop there overnight unless..." "Unless what?" Jaden's mind raced, connecting dots from years of street observation. Pull up the locations of the other energy anomalies. The display shifted, showing 6 points scattered across the lower city. To most, they would appear random, but Jaden immediately recognized the pattern. They're positioned at key infrastructure junctions, he said, pointing to each location. Water purification, power distribution, atmospheric regulators, and look. He indicated the timestamps. They're appearing in sequence, moving inward toward the central district. Lydia's eyes widened. The Draxians aren't preparing for an attack. They're already here. And they're setting up for something big, Jaden agreed. Those aren't random energy spikes. They're test activations. Of what? I don't know, but nothing good plants roots at 6 critical infrastructure points. Jaden straightened. We need to tell your father. Lydia was already activating the communication system when the monitors suddenly flickered. One by one, the surveillance feeds began to cut out. They're jamming our system, she said, her voice tight with alarm. We're being blinded. Through the transparent dome above, Jaden saw a flash of light in the distance, then another closer to the triad. Those aren't system failures, he said grimly. The attack has already begun. The main lift wasn't responding. Emergency lights bathed the observatory in pulsing crimson as distant explosions shook the triad's superstructure. We need to get to the command center, Lydia said, her military training evident in her calm efficiency as she accessed a hidden panel. Father will be coordinating the defense. I'm guessing the express elevator's out of service? Jaden quipped, masking his own tension. There's a maintenance shaft that runs parallel to the main lift system, she replied, revealing a narrow passage behind the panel. It's restricted access, but let me guess. Commander's daughter privileges? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Something like that. They entered the shaft, which contained a series of ladder rungs embedded in the wall. Lydia started down first, the flowing fabric of her gown suddenly impractical. Noticing Jaden's hesitation above her, she glanced up. What's wrong? Nothing, he said quickly, averting his eyes from the view her position afforded. Just, calculating our best route? Her silver eyes narrowed knowingly. Of course you are. They descended in silence for several minutes, the distant sounds of chaos growing louder. Suddenly, the entire shaft shuddered violently. Jaden lost his grip, sliding down several rungs before catching himself. You okay? He called down. Yes, Lydia answered, her voice tight. But we need to exit soon. This shaft runs too close to the outer hull. If the triad's structural integrity is compromised... Say no more, Jaden interrupted. I've had enough falling experiences to last a lifetime. They reached an access hatch 10 levels down. Lydia entered a security code, but the panel remained red. Systems are down, she muttered. We'll have to override manually. Allow me, Jaden said, examining the panel. Locks were my specialty back on the streets. He pried open the control housing and studied the circuitry for a moment before rearranging several connections. The hatch slid open with a reluctant groan. Impressive, Lydia acknowledged as they climbed through. Don't sound so surprised. Humans are good for something besides charity work. They emerged into a corridor filled with smoke and flashing emergency lights. The floor was littered with debris, but thankfully no bodies. Distant weapons fire echoed through the structure. The command center is 3 levels down, Lydia said, orienting herself. This way. They moved cautiously through the corridor, Lydia leading with the confidence of someone who had grown up in these halls. At an intersection, she suddenly flattened herself against the wall, pulling Jaden back with her, her body pressed against his, warm and tense. Draxian infiltrators, she whispered, her breath tickling his ear. Jaden peered carefully around the corner. 2 figures in sleek, predatory armor were accessing a security terminal. Unlike the blue-skinned Ardelians, Draxians had mottled green-gray skin and elongated skulls that gave them a distinctly reptilian appearance. How did they get inside? He whispered back. They must have had agents in place before the attack, she replied. We need to find another route. Jaden studied their surroundings, noticing a maintenance panel overhead. Up there, ventilation system. Lydia looked skeptical. Those shafts are barely large enough for maintenance drones. Good thing I'm skinny from years of malnutrition, Jaden said with a grim smile. Give me a boost. With surprising strength, Lydia helped lift him to the ceiling panel. He worked it loose and pulled himself into the narrow shaft, then reached down to help her. The fit was tight, forcing them to crawl on their stomachs through the dusty conduit. Not exactly how I imagined getting you into a tight space with me, Jaden murmured. Focus, Jaden, she replied, but he could hear the smile in her voice. They navigated through the ventilation system, guided by Lydia's knowledge of the Triad's layout. Through grates, they glimpsed scenes of chaos. Ardelian soldiers exchanging fire with Draxian infiltrators. Medical teams tending to wounded. Civilians being evacuated to secure areas. The Draxians were more prepared than we realize, Lydia whispered. This isn't just an attack, it's a full invasion. And those energy signatures we detected? Probably disruptor devices targeting our defense systems. They reached a junction where the shaft widened enough for them to sit up. Lydia checked a small holomap projected from her wrist device. The command center should be directly below us, 2 levels down. A sudden explosion rocked the shaft, sending dust and debris raining down on them. Jaden instinctively pulled Lydia close, shielding her with his body as a section of the conduit collapsed behind them. When the dust settled, they found themselves pressed together in the cramped space, faces inches apart. For a moment, the battle seemed distant, irrelevant. You didn't have to do that, Lydia said softly, her silver eyes reflecting the emergency lights filtering through the grate beneath them. Street survival tip number 3, Jaden replied, his voice husky. Protect what matters. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, then a warmth he hadn't seen before. Her hand moved to his face, fingers cool against his skin. Another explosion jolted them back to reality. The grate beneath them groaned and suddenly gave way, sending them tumbling into the room below in a tangle of limbs and dust. Jaden landed hard, Lydia on top of him. As the dust cleared, he became aware of several pulse rifles aimed directly at them. Hold your fire, barked a familiar voice. Commander Talon stood at a central tactical display, surrounded by his officers. The command center was a hive of activity, displays showing battles raging throughout the Triad and across Keldoria. Father! Lydia scrambled to her feet, composure instantly restored despite her disheveled appearance. What in the 7 moons of Ardell are you two doing in the ventilation system? Talon demanded, though relief was evident in his eyes. Avoiding Draxian infiltrators, Jaden answered, wincing as he stood. They're all over the upper levels. Colonel Viridian approached, his uniform scorched and torn. We've detected energy signatures throughout the city, but we can't determine their purpose. We know what they are, Licia said quickly, explaining what they had discovered in the observatory. Infrastructure targets, Talon mused, studying the tactical display. But why? Disabling city systems would affect their own forces as well. Jaden stepped forward, studying the display. Unless they don't plan on staying. Sir, I think these aren't just disruptors. They're bombs. Absolutely not, Colonel Viridian slammed his fist on the tactical display. We cannot entrust a critical mission to a human street urchin. Commander Talon studied the holographic map of Keldoria, where 6 pulsing red dots mark the suspected bomb locations. 3 of our teams have already been ambushed. The Draxians control too many of the main thoroughfares. I know ways nobody else does, Jaden insisted. Maintenance tunnels, drainage systems, abandoned transit lines, routes the Draxians won't be watching because most people don't even know they exist. Talon's silver eyes shifted to his daughter. Lydia! Jaden's knowledge of the Undercity could be our only advantage, she said firmly. I've seen his ability to navigate hostile territory. I trust him. The commander nodded slowly. Very well. Assemble a small team. You'll need to move quickly and quietly. I'll lead it, Lydia volunteered immediately. Absolutely not, Talon and Viridian said in unison. With respect, Father, Lydia countered, I'm the only one who's worked with both our tactical systems and Jaden. I can identify the devices and disarm them. A tense silence fell over the command center. Another explosion rocked the Triad, making the decision more urgent. 4 hours, Talon finally said. You have 4 hours before the Draxians could potentially activate those devices. Take Lieutenant Malin and Sergeant Krell. They're our best infiltration specialists. 30 minutes later, Jaden found himself in the lower levels of the Triad, outfitted in lightweight Ardelian combat gear modified to fit his human frame. Beside him, Lydia checked the specialized disruptor tools she would use to neutralize the bombs. Her formal gown had been replaced by a form-fitting, tactical suit that accentuated her lithe, blue figure. "See something interesting?" she asked, catching his gaze. "Just appreciating Ardelian engineering," he replied with a half-smile. Lieutenant Malin, a stern-faced Ardelian with battle scars across his left cheek, cleared his throat disapprovingly. "We should move out. The nearest device is in Sector 17. That's deep in Draxian-controlled territory now," Sergeant Krell noted, a stockier Ardelian whose massive frame made Jaden feel particularly small. "We're not taking the main routes," Jaden said, moving to a maintenance hatch that even the Ardelian soldiers hadn't noticed. "We're going under them." The hatch led to a narrow service tunnel that smelled of mildew and industrial chemicals. As they descended deeper into Keldoria's forgotten infrastructure, the sounds of battle above grew distant. "How do you know these passages?" Lieutenant Malin asked suspiciously. "When you're homeless, you learn every corner where you might find shelter or safety," Jaden explained, navigating the labyrinthine tunnels with confidence. "Most people never look down." They emerged briefly into a lower market district, now abandoned as civilians had fled the fighting. Jaden led them through a series of back alleys and hidden passages, avoiding Draxian patrols with uncanny precision. "First target should be just ahead," Lydia whispered, checking her scanner. "Energy signature is consistent with a high-yield fusion device." The location, a water purification substation, was guarded by 2 Draxian soldiers. Sergeant Krell dispatched them silently with stun charges while Lieutenant Malin secured the perimeter. Inside, they found a sleek, metallic device attached to the station's main control hub, pulsing with ominous energy. "Can you disarm it?" Jaden asked as Lydia examined the bomb. "Yes, but it will take time," she replied, extracting tools from her kit. "Keep watch." While the Ardelian soldiers monitored the approaches, Jaden stayed with Lydia, handing her tools as needed. Their fingers brushed with each exchange, sending unexpected warmth through his body despite the tension of the situation. "Why did you volunteer for this?" he asked quietly. "Your father would have understood if you'd stayed in the command center." Lydia's hands remained steady as she worked on the device. "Because you volunteered. And I wasn't about to let you face this alone." "I've been alone most of my life," Jaden said. "I'm used to it." She paused, silver eyes meeting his. "Perhaps you shouldn't have to be." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings, until Lieutenant Malin's urgent whisper broke the spell. "Draxian patrol approaching. We need to move." "Done," Lydia announced, the bomb's lights fading as she disconnected the final component. "1 down, 5 to go." They slipped away moments before the Draxian patrol entered the substation, moving deeper into the Undercity. The next 3 targets followed a similar pattern, Jaden guiding them through hidden routes, the team neutralizing guards, and Lydia disarming the devices with increasing efficiency. Between the 4th and 5th targets, they took shelter in an abandoned maintenance hub to rest briefly and check their tactical updates. The news wasn't good. Draxian forces had pushed deeper into Keldoria, and the Triad itself was under heavy assault. "We're running out of time," Lieutenant Malin said grimly. "The last 2 devices are in the most heavily patrolled sectors." "There's another way," Jaden said, studying the map, "but it's risky, and we'd have to go through the old sewer systems." "Sewers?" Sergeant Krell looked disgusted. "They were decommissioned years ago when Keldoria upgraded its waste management," Jaden explained. "Most sections are dry now, but they're unstable. Nobody goes down there, not even the desperate." "Which makes them perfect," Lydia concluded. The entrance to the old sewers was hidden beneath a derelict processing plant. The air was stale and heavy with decay, the darkness almost absolute except for their tactical lights. "Stay close," Jaden warned. "These tunnels can shift without warning." They moved carefully through the crumbling infrastructure, the silence broken only by the distant drip of water and their own cautious footsteps. In the confined space, Lydia stayed close to Jaden, her presence both comforting and distracting. "How much farther?" Lieutenant Malin asked, his voice echoing slightly. "Almost there," Jaden replied. "The next device should be—" A violent tremor cut him off as the tunnel shook. Part of the ceiling collapsed behind them, cutting off their retreat. "Forward is our only option now," Lydia said, her shoulder pressed against Jaden's in the narrowed passage. They pushed on, eventually reaching a junction but opened into a larger chamber. According to their scanner, the fifth device was directly above them. "We'll need to access the upper level," Lydia said, pointing to a maintenance ladder. As they climbed, another tremor shook the structure. Jaden lost his footing and slipped, but Lydia's hand shot out, catching his wrist with surprising strength. Their eyes met in the dim light, her silver gaze holding his with an intensity that transcended their perilous situation. When they reached the top, she didn't immediately release him. "Lydia," he began, his voice low. "Later," she promised, her fingers brushing his cheek briefly. "When this is over?" The fifth device was disarmed without incident, leaving only one remaining target, located in Keldoria's central power distribution hub. As they approached through the abandoned tunnels, Sergeant Krell's communicator crackled to life. "Command to strike team," came Commander Talon's voice, distorted by interference. "Draxian forces are converging on your position. They must know what you're doing." "We're almost at the final target," Letier reported. "ETA 5 minutes. Be advised," Talon continued. "We've detected a countdown sequence. All devices are linked. If one remains active, they'll all detonate remotely." The team exchanged grim looks. Their mission had just become even more urgent. "We'll get it done," Jaden promised, leading them toward the final location. As they emerged from the tunnels near the power hub, they found themselves in the middle of a firefight between Ardelian defenders and Draxian assault forces. Lieutenant Malin took a blast to the shoulder, while Sergeant Krell moved to cover their advance. "Go!" Krell shouted. "We'll hold them off!" Jaden and Lydia sprinted across the open ground, pulse fire sizzling the air around them. They reached the power hub's access door, which Jaden quickly bypassed with his lock-breaking skills. Inside, they found the final device, larger than the others and already in its activation sequence. A holographic countdown displaying less than 3 minutes. "This is more complex," Lydia said, immediately setting to work. "They must have anticipated we'd neutralize the others." Jaden stood guard at the door, watching as Draxian forces pushed the Ardelians back. "Whatever you're going to do it fast." "I need more time," she said, her fingers flying over the device's components. "Then I'll buy you some," Jaden replied, moving to secure the entrance. As Lydia worked frantically to disarm the bomb, Jaden prepared for what might be their last stand, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything between them, if they survived. "I can't disarm it," Lydia said, her voice tight with frustration as the countdown ticked below 2 minutes. "They've integrated a quantum lock. If I try to force it, it'll detonate immediately." Jaden joined her at the device, studying its pulsing core and the complex web of energy conduits connecting it to the power hub. "Wait," he said, an idea forming. "It's connected directly to the power grid, right?" "Yes, it's drawing energy to amplify the blast. Then what if we give it too much? Overload it before it can detonate?" Lydia's silver eyes widened. "That could work. A controlled surge might fry the detonator without triggering the explosive core. Can you access the power distribution controls?" She moved to a nearby terminal. "Yes, but I'd need to override the safety protocols, and the surge would need to be precisely calibrated. Too little won't stop it. Too much could trigger the bomb." "Do it," Jaden said, moving to barricade the door as the sounds of fighting drew closer. "I'll buy you time." The terminal responded to Lydia's commands, display shifting as she bypassed security measures with practiced efficiency. "I need to reroute power from 3 substations to create enough of a surge." Jaden glanced at the countdown. 90 seconds remaining. A blast hit the door, the metal buckling slightly. Draxian voices called orders on the other side. "Almost there," Lydia said, fingers flying across the controls. "But I'll need to be at the device to manually connect the override when the surge hits." "That's suicide," Jaden protested. "You'd be right next to it if something goes wrong." "There's no other way," she insisted. "Someone has to complete the circuit at precisely the right moment." Another blast hit the door. It wouldn't hold much longer. "Then I'll do it," Jaden said. "No, I know the—" "Show me," he interrupted. "Quick. 60 seconds. Reluctantly, Lydia guided him through the process, showing him where to connect the override module she'd prepared. "When the surge hits, you'll have a 3-second window to complete the connection," she explained. "Too early or too late, and boom, got it." The door buckled further as another blast struck it. "Go!" Jaden urged her. "Get to the terminal and start the surge." 45 seconds. Lydia hesitated, then suddenly pulled him close, pressing her lips to his in a fierce, desperate kiss. The sensation of her cool blue skin against his sent electricity through his body that had nothing to do with power surges. "Don't you dare die," she whispered against his lips. "Wouldn't dream of it," he replied with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. She rushed to the terminal while Jaden positioned himself at the bomb, override module in hand. 30 seconds. The door finally gave way, and Draxian soldiers poured in. Letya ducked behind the terminal as pulse fire filled the room. "Now!" she shouted, activating the surge. 20 seconds. Jaden felt the hair on his arms stand up as massive energy began flowing through the conduits. The bomb's casing grew hot to the touch. 15 seconds. A Draxian blast struck near him, singeing his arm. He ignored the pain, focusing entirely on the device. 10 seconds. "Surge at maximum," Lydia called. "Connect it now." Jaden slammed the override module into place, completing the circuit. Blinding energy coursed through the device, the countdown display flickering wildly. 5 seconds. 4, 3. The display went dark. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the bomb's core made a high-pitched whine before fizzling out completely. Its energy dispersed harmlessly into the grid. The Draxian soldiers froze in shock. In that moment of hesitation, Ardelian reinforcements led by Sergeant Krell burst in from another entrance, quickly overwhelming them. "You did it!" Lydia breathed, rushing to Jaden's side. "We did it!" he corrected, wincing at the burn on his arm. Within hours, the tide had turned. With their bombs neutralized and their surprise advantage lost, the Draxian forces began a hasty retreat from Keldoria. The Ardelian military, rallying around Commander Talon, pushed them back on all fronts. 3 days later, Jaden stood on a balcony in the Triad, watching as the city below began its recovery. His arm was bandaged, but the Ardelian medical technology had ensured it would heal without scarring. "Admiring the view," came Lytia's voice behind him. He turned to find her approaching, dressed more casually than he'd seen before, her silver-white hair loose around her shoulders. "Just thinking about how different it looks from up here," he said. "A week ago, I was down there scrounging for food." She joined him at the railing, her shoulder brushing his. "And now you're the hero of Keldoria. Father says the Ardelian High Command is considering creating a special advisory position for you." "Me? Advising military commanders?" Jaden laughed, and "I'm just a street kid who got lucky." "No," Lytia said firmly, turning to face him. "You're the human who gave his only protection to a stranger, who risked his life to save a city that had never shown him kindness. That's not luck, Jaden. That's who you are." The sincerity in her silver eyes made his heart race. "What about you? What do you think I am?" "I think," she said, stepping closer, "you're the most frustrating, unpredictable, remarkable person I've ever met. That's quite a list." "I'm not finished," she continued, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I think you're someone who showed me that helping others doesn't have to come with calculations of debt and obligation. That sometimes the right thing to do is simply the right thing to do." Jaden caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. "And what about us? Is there an us?" "My father has already given his blessing," she said with a small smile. "Apparently saving his life in his city has earned you the right to court his daughter, despite your unconventional background." "Court you?" Jaden raised an eyebrow. "Is that an Ardelian custom?" "It is," she confirmed, "though I'm willing to learn human customs as well." The invitation in her eyes was unmistakable. Jaden pulled her closer, their bodies fitting together perfectly despite their different physiologies. "I think we can figure out a compromise," he murmured, before claiming her lips with his own. That night, they discovered that despite their different world, some languages were universal, the language of touch, of whispered words, of two bodies finding harmony in the darkness. Their union was a bridge between species, passionate and tender, breaking down the final barriers between them. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Lydia traced the contours of his face with wonder. "In Ardelian culture," she said softly, "there's a belief that souls can recognize each other across lifetimes. across species. We call it calendry, the reunion of spirits. Is that what this is? Jaden asked, pressing a kiss to her palm. I don't know, she admitted, but I know that when you gave my father your blanket that night, you set in motion something neither of us could have imagined. 1 month later, Commander Talon stood before the assembled Ardelian High Command and the newly formed Human Ardelian Diplomatic Council. At his side were Jaden and Lydia, now officially recognized as bondmates under both human and Ardelian law. The Draxian threat has been neutralized, Talon announced, thanks in large part to the actions of this young human. He turned to Jaden, presenting him with a familiar gray-beige cloak, now restored and embellished with Ardelian symbols of honor. A simple act of kindness, Talon continued, giving a blanket to a dying stranger has forged an alliance that will strengthen both our peoples. As Jaden accepted the cloak, his mother's last gift to him now a symbol of interspecies unity, he reflected on how far he had come from that cold alley. From a homeless boy with nothing to give but a blanket to a bridge between worlds. Lydia's hand found his, her touch a promise of all that was to come. Sometimes the smallest gestures of humanity could change the course of galaxies.